Every person has events when he completely rethinks his life and his beliefs, principles, and worldview in general change. Two people ruined my life and the idea of a strong and friendly family. One of these people was my beloved wife, who told me lies for a long time, and like a naive fool, I believed her. On the initial day of 4th grade, I encountered David Jones. I'm Henry Johnson, and due to Miss Jenkins' seating arrangement by alphabetical order, David ended up sitting behind me in the middle row. Being 10, I naturally harbored suspicions toward anything or anyone new. So, when the new kid, David, was placed right behind me, my wariness intensified. I wasn't the largest kid in class. In fact, I was rather small for my age and only caught up in size with the others after experiencing a growth spurt a few years later. David, on the other hand, was slightly bigger than me, which only fueled my mistrust. Our interaction took a negative turn on that first day when I felt a tap on my back and turned around to find David, the new kid, asking to borrow a pencil. I couldn't fathom how someone could come to school unprepared. While searching for a spare pencil in my desk, Miss Jenkins interrupted the class to question why I wasn't paying attention. "Give him a pencil and stop fooling around," she scolded, being reprimanded on the very first day. David was not earning any points in my book. However, over the next few days, we exchanged some conversation, mostly within a group of the more studious students, and I began to entertain the idea that perhaps the new kid wasn't so bad after all. Throughout this time, Billy Barron was reaffirming his dominance on the playground. Known as Big Billy, he was the epitome of a class bully, even targeting 5th graders whenever he could. He exuded arrogance in his physical prowess. Big Billy wasted no time, and on the 4th day of school, he cornered me during a moment of teacher distraction, determined to assert his dominance. Suddenly, David appeared out of nowhere, body-checking Big Billy and sending him crashing to the ground. David swiftly mounted Billy, landing 4 solid punches to his face, before standing back, anticipating repercussions. To our surprise, Billy broke down in tears. The commotion attracted 2 teachers before anyone could flee. Though we ended up with a week of detention, nothing could wipe the smiles off our faces. Outside the principal's office, I thanked David for his intervention. "That's what friends are for," he simply replied. Since that day, David and I forged a genuine friendship. By Christmas, we had become best friends, and by summer, our bond had deepened to that of brothers. I assisted David with his studies while he taught me self-defense techniques, helping each other overcome our weaknesses. Miss Jenkins seemed to have a keen eye because, by Thanksgiving, she had identified signs of dyslexia in David. With the support of his parents and a skilled therapist, David began to thrive academically, while I grew more confident in facing bullies. Would you believe it? By summer, even Billy had become friends with both David and me. It turned out Billy was dyslexic too, though his condition was more severe than David's, and his struggles with learning had fueled his bullying behavior. Once he received the necessary support, he underwent a remarkable transformation. Beneath his anger and frustration, there was a genuinely good person. Billy even came to our aid against older kids, leading me to ponder that perhaps dyslexia was more common than I had realized. As we matured and entered high school, Big Billy, as he was still affectionately called, took up football in the autumn and baseball in the spring, swiftly earning a prominent status in our high school. Despite his newfound popularity, he remained true to his kind-hearted nature. After graduation, he enlisted and tragically lost his life in Iraq a year later. His fellow soldiers held him in the same high regard as we did, making the day we bid farewell to our friend William Barron the most sorrowful in my life. However, that sorrow was surpassed 7 years later. David and I attended different universities, but we kept in contact. During holidays and summers, we would reunite, seamlessly picking up where we left off, sharing stories, pursuing romantic interests, and seeking fun while avoiding trouble. In my 3rd year, I met Ariel and fell deeply in love. She was charming, witty, intelligent, and kept me on my toes. She challenged me, flirting and teasing, but also taking things slowly. I was willing to wait indefinitely for her. It didn't take forever, just 6 months, before she became a permanent presence in my life. Or so I believed. When summer arrived, my parents eagerly wanted to meet her, quietly forming opinions about the woman who had captured my heart. She stayed with us for 2 weeks, while I stayed with her family. By summer's end, both sets of parents approved. Though they advised waiting until marriage, they likely understood it wasn't realistic. Ariel and I received gentle reminders about contraception from our respective parents. My father, in particular, emphasized using protection if necessary. I reassured him, knowing Ariel was already on birth control. During that summer when Ariel visited me, she met David, and they quickly developed a surprisingly close bond. There were moments when I'd step away for a few minutes only to return and find them sharing laughter. Ariel would playfully nudge him with her shoulder, and he would respond with a warm hug. It felt as though they had known each other for as long as David and I had known each other, and I'll admit, I felt a twinge of jealousy. But I reasoned with myself, reminding myself that they were the 2 closest people to me in the world, and if I couldn't trust them, who could I trust? As we returned to school for our senior year in the fall, Ariel occasionally inquired about David and his well-being. I tried to convince myself that it was normal given their newfound friendship, but at times, it weighed on my mind. While Ariel never dwelled on the topic, I couldn't shake the feeling that boundaries were being blurred. I knew I needed to mature and push aside any concerns I had about their relationship, and for the most part, I succeeded. When graduation arrived, I proposed to Ariel, and she said yes, bringing a sense of contentment. We both secured jobs in Hartford, Connecticut, found an apartment, and began our life together. Reflecting on a conversation I had with my parents years earlier at my cousin's wedding, I had declared, "I'll never go through all of this. I'll find a woman who wants a simple wedding followed by a celebration, and that's it." After my parents stopped laughing, my father offered some advice. "When you meet the right girl, and if you do, you'll do whatever she wants. Put on a smile and pretend to enjoy it." My mother's smile confirmed his wisdom, and I took the lesson to heart. When the time came, I assisted Ariel in finding a venue, hiring a florist, picking out the cake, deciding on the menu, and sending out invitations. I wore the tuxedo she liked, rehearsed my vows, and followed her lead. Go ahead and chuckle at me all you want. You guys did the same thing, and deep down, you know it. David flew in to be my best man, and the wedding went smoothly. I happily settled into married life with Ariel, and 6 months later, David relocated to Hartford. Life kept getting better every day. I had long overcome any jealousy I once felt, and had complete trust in both of them. It would later dawn on me how that trust had been misplaced. The 3 of us were thriving in our respective jobs, enjoying life's blessings. As we progressed beyond entry-level roles and embraced greater responsibilities, our bond remained strong despite living in different parts of town. David resided across town, yet the close-knit community of Hartford ensured regular gatherings. It was common for me to return home and find Ariel and David sharing laughs over a beer at the kitchen table. One Friday evening, I entered the house to playful banter. "Look who's back, shuffling in like an old-timer," teased Ariel, prompting giggles. "Rough day, huh?" she continued as I dropped my belongings on the sofa. "Some days it feels like all I do is paperwork, reports, and achieve nothing of substance," I grumbled. David, suddenly animated, interjected, "Nothing of substance? What kind of bureaucrat are you? The paperwork is the backbone. If it's sorted, everything's right." I rolled my eyes. "Tell that to NASA, who managed to crash a spacecraft into Mars despite their paperwork being in order." "It did make a spectacular dent," David chuckled, with Ariel joining in. I grabbed a beer, raising it in jest. "Never do anything half-heartedly." "To paperwork," we toasted, each taking a sip. That evening we grilled burgers, roasted potatoes, and Ariel prepared a salad. David stayed over, and the next morning we all went out for breakfast. Essentially, it marked the beginning of a fairly typical weekend. David mentioned having a Saturday night date and some errands to run beforehand, so we didn't see him for the remainder of the weekend. That suited me fine since I desired some alone time with Ariel, though technically it was just an apartment. As I mentioned, life was good. So good, in fact, that I failed to notice the subtle shifts in our relationship. It was perhaps a year and a half into our marriage when Ariel began staying late at work more frequently. She also started dressing more professionally. The changes weren't abrupt or excessive, so when I eventually recognized the pattern, I dismissed it as merely a driven young woman fulfilling her career obligations. With our increased income, I understood her desire to dress better. Despite this, we still regularly met up with David, who often waited for me alone on Friday evenings. "Is the old ball and chain working late again?" "It seems so. She's been doing that quite often lately. Yes, she's taken on more responsibilities and is working longer hours." David nodded and muttered, "Guess you have to admire that." I hesitated. "Yeah, I guess so. We've been discussing starting our family soon, but she wants to advance a bit more in the company first. Thinks it'll make it easier to return to work when she's ready." "Yeah, I suppose that makes sense," David replied, turning away. We grabbed a couple of beers and settled into chairs in the living room, both unusually quiet for a while. "Everything else going well at home?" David tried to sound casual, but it came out forced. "Yeah, mostly. She's been tired a lot lately when she gets home, so I've been pitching in more with the chores." I paused, debating whether to confess to my best friend. "Starting to worry about her, though. She's been too tired for, and I'm thinking maybe she needs an iron supplement or something." David seemed lost in thought for a moment before quietly musing. "Working late, tired all the time, not feeling intimate." He sighed. "Yeah, maybe she does need an iron supplement." I glanced at David, my brother in all but blood, and shook my head. "She wouldn't. Not Ariel. She'd never do that." "You're right. I'm just being paranoid. Not Ariel." We let the conversation drop for a few minutes before I looked at David and said, "Got some steaks in the fridge." "Whoa, living large. What's the occasion?" "Just feeling extravagant, my friend. Just feeling extravagant." It was a facade of confidence, albeit both of us needed to divert the conversation. David and I waited for a while, brought out some snacks, and had another beer before proceeding to grill the steaks upon Ariel's return home an hour later. From then on, it was a typical, enjoyable Friday night, and I pushed our earlier discussion to the back of my mind. This routine continued for about 6 months until one evening when Ariel approached me. "Henry, Mom isn't doing too well. She's been expressing feelings of loneliness, especially since Dad passed away. It's like she's just going through the motions." "I understand, darling. How about we invite her to stay with us for a while?" "Actually, I was thinking of going up there for a weekend. Maybe she just needs some mother-daughter time." Let me give you some background. David and I hail from southern Rhode Island, near the Connecticut border, while Ariel grew up outside Burlington, Vermont. She had a deep affinity for rural life, often seeking solace in the tranquility of remote fields away from the bustle of crowds and traffic. At least that's how she used to be. So I felt it was time for her to take a break. "When are you planning to leave?" "I was thinking of this weekend. I'll leave on Friday, drive up, and return Sunday evening. I'll spend the whole week after making it up to you. I could join you. Babe, if you do, my mom will just focus all her attention on you. You're like the son she never had," she said with a smile. "Except for your brother George, right?" "Well, George has always been a disappointment to Mom," and she burst into laughter. "Okay, babe. You win. Go see your mom and have a good time." "I love you, old man," she teased. Lately she'd taken to calling me that, though I wasn't quite fond of it. After that, she'd visit her mother approximately every 4 weeks, staying for a long weekend before returning home rejuvenated and content. It seemed beneficial for both her and her mother, so I refrained from complaining. Isn't that what husbands do? They strive to keep the women in their lives happy. At least that's what I was brought up to believe. Ariel visited her mother monthly for about 8 months, but she no longer worked late like she used to. She also didn't seem so tired. I thought visiting her mother from time to time was good for both of them, and I considered it a positive thing for all of us. Our bed life also improved, so I had no complaints. When things are going smoothly, it's easy to assume they'll continue that way, but change can happen suddenly and unexpectedly. One Wednesday night, while driving home in heavy rain, and distracted by my thoughts, I ran a red light and was hit hard on the driver's side. I'd heard of people dying in similar accidents, so once I regained my composure and understood what had occurred, I felt fortunate. I suffered a broken leg, bruises on my left side, and a mild concussion, but I was alive. Later, I realized that if the impact had occurred 6 feet further back on my door at 45 miles per hour, just a tenth of a second later, I would have been killed. That's how the mind of an engineer works. The difference between life and death was a mere tenth of a second. Emergency medical services arrived, placed me on a stretcher, and transported me to the hospital. After being examined, patched up and fitted with a cast on my leg, I was sent home the next morning. Ariel doted on me for a week, which I didn't mind at all. David started visiting me every night to check on my progress and offer assistance. Eventually, they both concluded that I was sufficiently mobile to care for myself, and life resumed its normal course. The following week, I went back to work, and either Ariel or David would give me rides there and back, while my coworkers continued to fuss over me. Using crutches tends to invite that kind of attention, and I'll admit, I took advantage of it. As the discomfort faded, the cast and crutches became more of a nuisance than anything else. I could manage stairs, the parking lot, and short walks, but it required effort, so I usually stayed in the building for lunch. I was mobile, but not exactly quick. Before long, Ariel stopped doting on me, and I started eagerly anticipating the day my cast would come off. 4 weeks after the accident, she approached me and said, "Henry, it's been a while since I visited my mother. Would you mind if I drove up there this weekend? I'll make it quick, leave Saturday morning and return Sunday night." I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but I was managing fine. Since I still couldn't drive, I called David to see if he could help out if needed. Was he available? Friday evening, he appeared at my door with a bag of groceries, mostly steaks, beer, and a couple bags of nachos, and settled into the guest room for the weekend. I couldn't complain. We cracked open a couple of cold ones while my wife packed for her trip. "Is Ariel off to see her mother again this weekend?" "Yeah, it's been a while. I'm doing all right, and her mom needs her." "I'm sure." I glanced at my friend, yet remained silent. As morning arrived, Ariel bid me farewell with a kiss, her spirits high as she exited the door and drove off towards Vermont. David appeared to linger at the doorway even after she had left, prompting me to finally inquire, "What's on your mind?" "Me? Nothing. You know me. I'm Mr. Get Along." "No worries. Nothing to see here," he replied. "Let's grab breakfast, Mr. Get Along. I'm famished." If you've never experienced having your leg in a cast, you can't comprehend the challenge of getting into a car with one leg completely straight and immovable. You're left with a couple of options: awkwardly sitting sideways in the back seat or attempting the slip and slide maneuver in the front. The slip and slide method goes like this. You adjust the seat all the way back and flatten the seat back. Placing a plastic bag on the seat, you sit on it and slide your way onto the seat back until you're far back enough to swing your leg into the car. Then you slide forward into the proper seating position and raise the seat back to its normal setting. Upon reaching your destination, you repeat the process in reverse to exit the car. Going out for breakfast became quite an ordeal, so I decided to make it worth the effort and ordered generously from the menu. Well, almost. I opted for eggs Benedict, home fries, coffee and orange juice with a side of several bacon slices. I briefly considered getting a grilled blueberry muffin, but felt too embarrassed to order it when the waitress returned. It was Saturday, and my injured leg gave me the perfect excuse to skip chores. So David and I decided to make the most of it. We visited the outdoor store to browse high-end fly rods and picked up a few flies. Despite our lofty aspirations, we stick to a budget. Next, we headed to the shooting range and rented a couple of guns for an hour. Neither of us owns firearms, nor do we particularly desire to, but occasionally we feel the urge to shoot a few rounds and show those targets some respect. Needless to say, the targets were never in any real danger. We grabbed a late lunch of barbecue, browsed the hardware store for new gadgets, visited the electronics store just for kicks, and made it back home by early evening. After a packed day, we settled on the porch with a couple of beers, engaged in conversation, and indulged in the largest plate of nachos we could put together. David had kept silent for months, but that night his pent-up thoughts began to surface. "How's Ariel's mom doing these days?" "Pretty much the same as usual. She seems fine when I talk to her, but Ariel says she's been feeling down since her husband passed away." "Doesn't she have a son?" "I think I met him. His name's George, right?" "Yeah, that's him. He's a solid guy. I don't see him as often as I'd like, but I think you'd get along. He's straightforward, funny, no nonsense. He married a local girl and lives about an hour away from Marie." "Marie being Ariel's mom, right?" "Exactly." "You two get along well?" "Oh, definitely. She's like a second mom to me. When Ariel and I got married, her husband passed away about a year later, but they both welcomed me into the family with open arms. You know, I can't recall a single time the TV was on when I visited. George Sr., Ariel's dad, had his favorite chair set up perfectly for watching TV, but he never once turned it on when I was there. We'd just sit around, chat, crack jokes, and enjoy each other's company, and that TV stayed off the whole time. Now that's true hospitality." I nodded in agreement, a smile creeping onto my lips. "I miss him," I admitted. The initial 6 months post his passing were particularly tough on Ariel. She wasn't herself. But then something shifted. Her demeanor improved. She began dressing more elegantly and sharing anecdotes about her colleagues at work. I suppose that coincided with her starting to socialize more on Fridays after work with the women from her office. David remained silent, his gaze fixed on the expansive lawn behind the apartment. "Have you been seeing much of Marie lately?" The question about Marie stirred something that had been gnawing at me for a while. Actually, apart from Christmas, I haven't seen her in nearly a year. Ariel goes up to visit once a month, and we talk on the phone occasionally, but she's been different. There's this tension between us for some reason. Last Christmas, when we went up for a few days, she seemed pleased to see me, but whenever we were alone, she'd find ways to keep busy. When I offered to help with the dishes, she politely declined and walked away. I tried assisting with dinner, but she insisted she didn't need any help. Honestly, I started to think she was upset with me, but then she'd flash me this warm smile from across the room when we were all together, and everything seemed fine. I've considered asking her about it, but I'm worried about hurting her feelings. Perhaps she isn't angry with you after all. It's possible she's feeling guilty. Why would she feel guilty? She's a kind woman who wouldn't harm a soul. I'm not sure. Maybe she's torn between loyalties? Perhaps she believes she's not fulfilling her role as your mother-in-law as she should? As I processed that remark, the phone rang. It was Ariel. "Henry, what have you two been doing today?" It was a routine check-in call. I recounted our day out, and she shared details of her day spent with her mother. It lasted maybe 5 minutes and concluded with, "I love you." It wasn't the stuff movies are made of, but it was typical of married life. Ariel says hi. "Hello, Ariel," David called out, though I had already ended the call. "What's Ariel's cell phone number?" I recited it from memory. "Why do you need it?" I found this cool app for my phone. I can input any cell phone number, and it tells me the phone's location. Why on earth would you have something like that? Some of the guys at work were submitting false reports claiming they visited vendors when they hadn't and so on. Instead of challenging each report and making the company look bad, I started tracking their phones. We pinpointed the issues and resolved them with minimal hassle. It saved us from having to mend fences with the vendors. Cool. You executives always have such weighty issues, was one of the most disrespectful exchanges we ever had. Didn't you mention your mother-in-law lives in Vermont? Yeah, she's just outside Burlington. Why? Well, according to this, Ariel's phone is in Maine. Specifically, it's in Portland. That can't be right. They're at least 200 miles apart. Your cell phone number is XXXX. Yeah? According to this, you're right in front of me. Let me see that. I glanced at the screen, and there I was. Well, David exaggerated a bit. It indicated I was somewhere within a few hundred yards of my house. Then, I entered my wife's cell phone number, and it showed she was in Maine. I checked my brother, sister, parents, and boss. They were all where they should be. I checked Ariel's number again, and it still said Maine. I looked at my phone's contacts, and my memory of her number was correct. What on earth is happening? Henry, do you ever call your mother-in-law while Ariel is there? No. Usually, Ariel calls me. Is there anything you didn't tell Ariel when she called? I understood his implication. I didn't pass on your regards. I'd love to greet her myself. I dialed Marie's number, and after 3 rings, she answered, "Hello? How's my favorite mother-in-law?" I expected her usual cheery response, but Marie remained oddly silent for what felt like a very long time. Marie, are you there? Yes, Henry, I'm here. How are you doing? I'm good. I was just thinking. It's been a while since we talked. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Oh, I'm doing fine, Henry. You know me, I've always been easygoing. And you? How's work? How's your recovery going? When do they take off the cast? She seemed unusually flustered. Marie's always been composed and laid back, so it caught me off guard. After chatting for a bit, I got to the point. Listen, Marie, sorry to bother you like this, but I wanted to speak to my wife about something important. Could you put her on the phone for me? The silence on the other end was overwhelming. Marie, are you still there? Yes, Henry, I'm sorry. Ariel went out to grab some eggs for tomorrow's breakfast. I'm sure she'll be back soon. Her voice trembled, and anyone could sense the tension. Marie wasn't skilled at lying, and it was obvious. All right. Please ask her to call me when she's back, no matter the time. I'll be waiting. Of course, Henry. I'm sure she'll get in touch soon. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up, turning to David. She lied to me. Is that common for her? She's never lied to me before. I didn't even think she knew how. This isn't like her at all. A few minutes later, the phone rang. It was Ariel. Hey, darling, I'm sorry I missed your call. No worries, I was just thinking of you and wanted to hear your voice. Oh, that's so sweet, I miss you too. Another reason I called is to let you know that David insists on treating us to dinner next weekend. How does that sound? Sounds like we should pick a fancy place. I could hear her laughter. How could she be laughing and fibbing at the same time? Listen, honey, I hate to bother your mom again, but there's something I need to tell her. Could you put her on for me? Silence. Then, oh, Henry, she's already gone to bed. Just tell me, and I'll pass it along. It's only been 10 minutes since I called her. I'm sure she's still awake. Please just take the phone to her and I'll be quick. That's when Ariel made her next big mistake. She got annoyed with me. Henry, I told you she's in bed and I'm not waking her. Just give me the message and I'll tell her in the morning. Now it was my turn for silence. Henry, are you still there? I really don't appreciate that attitude, and I certainly don't deserve it. I'll tell her when I see her. Good night, Ariel. Sweetie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean... I abruptly ended the call with her. I didn't do it intentionally. I was truly furious. It appeared my suspicions were justified, and she was displaying hostility to mask her betrayal. Where does your app indicate her phone's location now? In the same spot. It hasn't changed. Everything became evident to me. My spouse was deceiving me, and her mother was aiding her cover-up. I pondered intensely to find a plausible motive for Ariel to lie, and there was only one. Marie didn't even have that. The atmosphere in my apartment became tense for the next few hours. I had an urge to drink, but David intervened, saying, "You need to keep a clear head right now, and beer won't help with that." As he brewed coffee, I realized he had a plan. Holding 2 full travel mugs, he entered the living room and declared, "Get ready, Henry, we're hitting the road in the Charger." What on earth are you talking about? Listen, Henry, you're furious and full of uncertainty. Your heart is in denial, while your mind knows the truth. You need closure. We're heading to Portland to confront her. Are you in or out? Reflecting on it now, I think I was in shock. I sat there, torn and bewildered, until clarity struck me like a hammer. Anger and determination surged through me. I'm in. Despite my broken leg and crutches slowing me down, I was finally moving forward. The confused and shattered man who had been deceived by his wife and mother-in-law just hours ago. The fearful man suspecting infidelity, transformed into the man driving to Maine to confront his unfaithful wife and demand a divorce. It was late at night, the ideal time for driving, and the miles flew by without much to distract us. David was behind the wheel while I wrestled with my thoughts. Ariel was being unfaithful. For a whole year, she had been supposedly visiting her mother in Vermont. But was she really cheating on me all this time? Who was this other person, and how did she meet him? Perhaps in Vermont. But did she even go there during her weekends? I tried to regain control of my emotions and sort out what I knew from what I speculated. She claimed to be in Vermont, visiting her mother, yet she was in Maine. She lied to me, and so did her mother. It seemed they were colluding. She certainly wasn't at her mother's house, despite their attempts to convince me otherwise. All those nights out with her friends, her sharp attire at work, the gradual shift in her behavior, it all started to make sense. The drive from Hartford to Portland was quiet, taking about 3.5 hours on the highway. We departed from my place just after midnight, making a brief stop at a 24-hour convenience store for coffee and snacks. The absence of traffic made the journey smooth, and as we neared Portland, I used the GPS app on David's phone to pinpoint Ariel's location. Portland's layout made it easy to navigate, and by 4:30 a.m., we located her car parked in the lot below a 3-story apartment building. David acknowledged with a nod, saying, "Got it," before pulling back onto the street. "Where on earth do you think you're going? Do you want to go around ringing every doorbell to find her, or do you want to wait for her to come out?" "Well, I'm not sure. Damn it, I've never dealt with this before." "And you won't have to again. Let's find a quick stop, refresh, refuel, and then we'll be ready to keep an eye on her car." David was planning ahead. I was a bundle of nerves. "All right. I understand now." 20 minutes later, we were back at her car, parking in a spot that was discreet but still allowed a clear view of her vehicle. David turned off the charger, and we settled in to wait. It was 5 a.m. on a Sunday morning. The world was still, and my unfaithful wife was upstairs with her lover, chuckling about how easily she deceived her husband while I could only sit and wait. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, watching and waiting. The sun rose, the day warmed up, and still we remained there. It was nearly 10 a.m. when she emerged from the building, arm in arm with her weekend companion. I recognized him instantly. I had met him at a few of her work gatherings. "Isn't that her?" Of course it is. Pull up behind them and block them in so she can see me. David started up the Charger, maneuvered around the line of cars, halted behind what I presumed was the jerk's vehicle, and switched off the engine. The jerk gave me a defiant look just as he was about to demand I move, when Ariel suddenly glanced up and caught sight of me sitting just 10 feet away. Her eyes widened in shock. She dropped her purse, and before she could let out a scream, she collapsed unconscious. Her head hit the pavement hard, and I didn't lift a finger to assist her. Instead, I turned to the jerk and uttered, "Help her, asshole. She's your problem now. Advise her never to return. Ever." I signaled for David to proceed. He ignited the Charger's engine, and we merged back into traffic. My wife, the center of my world, lay sprawled on the ground behind me, unconscious, and I had just abandoned her there with her lover. If he wants the pleasure, he can handle the consequences. She was no longer my responsibility. I had cared for her through sickness, comforted her in times of loss, supported her through work troubles, taken her dancing when she craved excitement, and out to dinner when she desired it. I had managed finances, built savings, worked long hours, assisted with household chores, and done whatever was necessary when sharing a life with someone. Now, none of that burden rested on my shoulders. It was all his problem now. David drove for a while before pulling into a parking lot. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah. I've made all my decisions, cleared up all my doubts. I know what I'm going to do now." "Divorce?" "Absolutely. I vowed to stick by through thick and thin, but if I'm the only one invested in this marriage, it's not worth it. I won't tolerate being deceived or cheated on." David simply nodded, started the Charger, and we set off south on I-95. "Where to now?" I posed the question, knowing it was a big ask. "How about a day of driving?" David grinned. "Vermont?" "Yeah, Vermont. South on I-95, west on NH Right 4, then Right 202 to Concord, south on I-93, west on I-89, and keep going until Burlington." "How on earth do you know that?" "I looked it up while we were keeping an eye on her car." "I missed that. You were asleep." "Seriously?" "Relax. You were wiped out. Stress can do that." "My bad. Don't worry about it. You're dealing with a roller coaster of emotions, and I'm just along for the ride." I had a better understanding. My brother, a man filled with empathy, showed genuine concern for me and anyone he encountered. As we traveled south on I-95 and then west on NH Right 4, I pieced things together in my mind. I reviewed every conversation, every action, searching for anything that seemed unusual. There were minor discrepancies, but humans are complex, and I dismissed them as typical challenges within a marriage. I believed it was merely a devoted wife struggling with the demands of a career and building a life together. Marriage isn't always easy, but looking back, there were warning signs I overlooked. Somehow, David didn't miss them. Reflecting on our past discussions and his observations from the past year, I realized he had connected the dots. "You knew. How did you know?" "I didn't know. I just began to question." "What tipped you off?" "I'm not sure. It was the subtle details. It wasn't just the late nights at work or the Friday outings with friends or the trips up north to see her mother, but all of it combined. And then her gradual cessation of those small gestures that made me start wondering. What small actions? The way she used to reach out and touch you on the hand or arm whenever you were nearby, the gentle kisses, the smiles, and her desire to have your attention even in the midst of conversations with others. All those little gestures seemed to fade away about a year and a half after the wedding. Man, I envied you a lot. I kept thinking, why can't I find a girl like Ariel? I loved being around both of you and imagining, someday this is what my relationship will be like. Then, it all changed. How did you perceive it when I didn't? Oh, you saw it. We discussed it often. You just didn't want to accept it. You were deeply in love with your wife, and the idea that she wasn't as committed to the marriage as you were wasn't something you wanted to entertain. I was oblivious. You were deeply in love. Some women spend their whole lives searching for love and never find it, while Ariel had it and let it slip away. Trust me. As much as you're hurting now, she'll regret her actions more than you can imagine. You were a devoted husband, Henry. I know it sounds cliché, but you came home every night. You didn't squander your paycheck at the bar, and you remained faithful. You supported your wife, planned for the future, listened to her, and comforted her when she was upset. It might not seem like much, but in the grand scheme of things, it's everything. So where did I mess up? You didn't. She did. Why? Who knows? Maybe it was her father's death. Maybe the pressure of adulthood, marriage, and a career overwhelmed her. Maybe the idea of starting a family scared her. Maybe she encountered a smooth-talking manipulator who messed with her head. You might never find out. Heck, she might not even know herself. We continued our journey in silence for quite some time thereafter. The drive from Portland to Burlington spans 4.5 hours, and under different circumstances, I might have appreciated the scenery. However, on that particular day, it was simply a blur of miles and time ticking away as I mentally prepared myself to confront the woman who had been as much of a mother figure to me as the one who brought me into this world. I planned to question her about why she had betrayed me so profoundly. What had I done to deserve her falsehoods and deceit? I believed she owed me an explanation. During the drive, it dawned on me that this woman held the key to many of my unanswered questions, but would she be forthcoming with the truth? 45 minutes south of Portland, as we neared the New Hampshire border, I expressed frustration, saying, "I should have confronted him." David, keeping his eyes on the road, chuckled in response. "Absolutely, I can picture it. You'd swing open the car door, maneuver your way out with your bum leg, grab your crutches, hobble over to him, and give him a piece of your mind." I conceded, "I still should have done something." "Don't worry. Once your leg heals and you're back to full strength, we'll track him down. Maybe bring along a couple of friends. No need to play nice. He didn't when he betrayed you with your wife. We'll find him, give him what he deserves, and head back home." Agreed. We continued the journey in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, until we reached the Connecticut River, where David broke the silence, asking, "Feeling hungry?" "No." "Well, I am." With that declaration, he veered off the highway and we located a cozy family-style pub where we indulged in 2 hefty cheeseburgers. As I requested a beer, David intervened, informing the waitress, "He'll have an iced tea." I regarded him incredulously. "Don't you think I've earned a beer?" "You'll need your faculties intact when we arrive." And then, addressing the waitress again, he reiterated, "He'll have an iced tea, and so will I." I glanced at the waitress and shrugged. Over lunch, we delved into the inquiries I had for Marie. I sought answers regarding why and for how long, suspecting she possessed at least partial knowledge. Most importantly, I grappled with understanding how she could deceive me for such an extended period. It's not an overstatement to say that Marie was akin to a second mother to me. When your spouse betrays you, it's devastating but comprehensible. Marriage vows offer no absolute protection against betrayal. Mothers, however, are expected to embody something loftier. They're meant to love unconditionally, support steadfastly, and remain truthful through it all. That's when David delivered the second piece of bad news for the day. Perhaps that's what happened. What do you mean? Maybe she felt compelled to support Ariel despite being ashamed of her daughter's actions. At that moment, I realized Marie could never prioritize me over her own daughter. It didn't lessen the pain, but it prepared me for what awaited us at her house. There was no doubt anymore. I had lost both a wife and a mother on the same day. It was 4 p.m. when we arrived at Marie's house. No one greeted us at the door, indicating perhaps Ariel hadn't called, and Marie wasn't expecting us. "Should I wait here? Perhaps you should speak with her alone. You've been by my side through it all. You're deeply involved now, so you might as well accompany me till the end." David assisted me out of the car, and together we proceeded to the door. where we rang the bell. Instead of Marie, it was George Jr. who answered. Stepping onto the porch, he closed the door behind him. "Henry, I'm relieved to see you. Your wife called Mom a couple of hours ago, and she's been distraught ever since. She's really struggling, Henry. I haven't seen her like this since Dad passed away, and even then she held up better than she is now. Well, Ariel's deception has been exposed, and your mother is involved." "Deception? What do you mean?" "Ariel has been unfaithful to me, and Mom was covering for her." George's posture stiffened as he locked eyes with me. "That can't be true." "It is. Mom lied to me last night, insisting Ariel was here all weekend." "Did you see her?" "I just came over to take Mom to brunch, but Ariel wasn't here when I arrived." "That's because she's been on the coast in Portland all weekend, staying with a former colleague from Connecticut. Both Ariel and Mom repeatedly deceived me, and I'm here to confront them." George glanced back at the door. "Mom's in a fragile state, Henry. I won't be harsh with her, but I need answers." George hesitated before reiterating. "Okay, but she's really struggling right now, Henry. Please, be gentle." "I'll try my best." As I approached the door, David interjected. "I think I'll stay here. This is a family matter now." Reluctantly, I agreed. As I crossed the threshold of the familiar home, I realized it would be my last time entering. My relationship with Ariel and Marie had ended, and I dreaded confronting George's mother with the truth. In the span of a single day, I had lost half my family, altering my life irreversibly. Inside, Marie's sobs reached my ears, and upon seeing me, her cries intensified as the weight of her betrayal sank in. Approaching her, I witnessed her anguish, and any desire for answers vanished in the face of her silent admission of guilt. I no longer sought explanations. Her pain surpassed any hurt I could inflict. With a heavy heart, I uttered a simple farewell to Marie before departing, leaving her anguish echoing behind me. Perhaps, in her eyes, I had been like a son. As I walked away, David's comment about the swiftness of my exit hung in the air. I nodded to David and suggested, "Shall we go?" 2 minutes later, we were on the road heading south towards Connecticut. As we drove in silence, my mind began to clear, and I reflected on the significant role my brother David had played in my life. From our early days in 4th grade through grade school, high school, and our reconnection. After college, I pondered where I would be without him. What if he hadn't transferred to my school that year and sat behind me in class? Who would I be without a brother to accompany me on life's journey? Who else would have supported me through it all? Glancing at David as we traveled back to Burlington, I expressed my gratitude, saying, "Thanks, man. I don't know where I'd be right now without you." Without diverting his gaze from the road, he replied simply, "That's what brothers are for." After a moment, he added, "You know, this isn't over yet." "I know. It's not over, but the marriage is." We continued in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I realized I would need to find a lawyer soon. There would be allegations, rebuttals, and tears. As dinks, dual income, no kids, and young, we didn't have much in terms of assets or investments. Since we rented and didn't own, dividing our property would be straightforward. For an hour, neither of us spoke until David finally broke the silence. "What's on your mind?" "Just pondering if I'll have to meet her again, dividing up the usual mess." "And who gets custody of me?" I glanced at my friend, still focused on the road, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. "I suppose that'd be me. She's going to deal with plenty as it is." To any passerby on the highway observing us laughing like fools, we might seem like old friends enjoying a leisurely Sunday drive, exchanging jokes and banter. He once called himself my friend, but he meant much more. I shuddered to think where I'd be without my brother. It goes without saying that the end of the marriage wasn't straightforward or calm. Ariel wasn't at home when we arrived. Actually, she took the following week off and spent it with her mother. I received the expected phone calls and texts, but they didn't reveal anything new. When she returned and asked for forgiveness, I had none to offer. Her betrayal wasn't a one-off mistake made in a moment of drunkenness. It was a calculated and ongoing pattern of deceit that began while Crapsack was working in Hartford. Despite her explanations, I refused to accept any excuses, including the old chestnut, "I didn't take anything away from you." That was nonsense. Eventually, she moved out, and after 9 months, the divorce was finalized, with her relocating to Portland. Unfortunately, she repeated her mistake by marrying the guy. However, this second marriage lasted less than 2 years. He turned out to be an unapologetic cheater, and she was the only one who didn't see it coming. David and I never managed to make that trip back north for the closure we needed. By the time my leg had healed and I'd regained my strength, Crapsack didn't seem worth the effort or the risk anymore. I wasn't going to sacrifice my freedom for such a worthless excuse of a person. Marie occasionally calls, and I make an effort to maintain civility. Each call involves an apology, and I've started responding with a simple, "I understand, Marie. Perhaps one day I'll genuinely forgive her, but the day hasn't arrived yet." The affection I once had for my stepmother isn't as strong as it used to be, but I've come to recognize the difficult position Ariel put her in. Marie's deceitful actions were aimed at salvaging my marriage, hoping Ariel would come to her senses. However, it ultimately proved to be a futile attempt to achieve an unattainable goal. She did me a small favor, though it seems more self-serving than altruistic. Marie never allowed Ariel's presence in her home and maintained a distant attitude towards him, treating him as an outsider even after our marriage. While it may seem like too little, too late, I acknowledge the effort it took for her to do so. However, her actions led to her daughter becoming isolated within her own family and possibly contributed to the downfall of her second marriage. For me, life continues onward. It's been nearly 2 years since that pivotal day, and I'm contemplating testing the waters of dating. While some may perceive this time frame as lengthy, change unfolds gradually and requires considerable effort for me. Trust, especially, is a slow journey now. David still visits regularly, but now I have the freedom to visit him just as easily. He's seeing a delightful woman with a contagious laugh. She's aware of my situation and has made her feelings about infidelity clear. The dynamic has shifted, and I find myself envious of my friend, imagining one day I'll experience this too. It's often said that divorce resembles a death in the family. Yet that analogy falls short. Divorce feels more like half the family perishes, leaving the remaining half to limp along as best they can.